So now that we've heard a bit more about what we can expect regarding regulatory reform in the near future, I think it is worthwhile to hear the industry's perspective. Here to provide that perspective is Björn Fuchs, who was recently appointed as chair of the VNLOK Trade Association. Welcome, Björn. I think we're all very eager to hear your insights. Please come to the stage. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dank je wel.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a true privilege to stand here before you today as the newly elected chair of VNLOK. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our members for their unanimous support and their trust. I would also like to thank our former chair, Helma Lodders, for VNLOK would not be what it is today without her professional efforts. Today, I would like to reflect on maintaining market viability in a changing regulatory environment. Some of you might be wondering about the image behind me. An image of a marathon? No, we didn't just change gaming in Holland into running in Holland. But maybe some of you do have an interest in sports. For now, I'm interested in how many of you have actually run a marathon. Could you please raise your hand if you have ever run a marathon? As expected, most of you haven't. And personally, I must be honest, I haven't either. I carry about 105 kilos not to run marathons. But the truth is, we're all wrong. Everyone that didn't raise their hand is actually part of a marathon. It's called the Dutch online gambling market. For some of you, that marathon started way before October 1st, 2021. Others may have joined just recently. No matter when you've joined, you have entered a market that requires a steady pace, a long-term endurance, and a safe environment. It is not a sprint, and there are no quick wins. However, our joint marathon is now in a critical phase. The choices that are going to be made in the upcoming months determine if the regulated market survives and thrives, or that it unravels under the weight of well-intended but potentially counterproductive burdens. A viable market cannot accept the fact that 51 cents of every euro spent goes to unlicensed, illegal online casinos, to operators in a black market that do not care about consumer protection, that don't pay any taxes, and that wouldn't know how to spell duty of care if they wanted to. This should deeply concern every person in this room, whether you're an operator, a care professional, an affiliate, part of the gambling authority or the ministry. A safe and viable market demands that we jointly find the right balance, the right pace to ensure that all players and stakeholders reach their desired finish line in a proper and safe manner. This balance can only be achieved if three perspectives of market viability are taken into account: protective viability, regulatory viability, and economic viability. The first perspective is protective viability. Consumer protection is and will always be the cornerstone of the Dutch legal online market. The members of our trade organization are committed to that cornerstone. The same goes, without a doubt, for all current licensed operators. Any operator that disagrees should surrender its license and leave the market immediately. For in the eye of the public, we are as good as our worst example. Dutch consumers do not just need duty of care, they deserve the most effective duty of care. However, when protective measures have adverse effects that push those players into the illegal online market, the net level of that protection declines and even becomes negative. Recent Belgian research published last week showed alarming statistics. 25% of all Belgian gamblers are actively playing on illegal gambling websites. Even more concerning, 47% of gamblers who registered in the Belgian exclusion register resumed gambling on illegal gambling websites. And finally, after raising the minimum age for online gambling to 21 years of age, the percentage of young adults that gamble on illegal websites went up from 50 to 65%. These are statistics and trends, like the ones in Germany, that we should prevent from ever existing in the Dutch market. They so clearly emphasize that when consumer demands persist, unbalanced and protective measures, which are disproportionate, will ultimately prove counterproductive. This connects directly to the second perspective: regulatory viability. The current state of the Dutch online market doesn't have the luxury of trial and error. More so than ever, regulatory and policy decisions must have a positive effect. The effects of the recent regulatory changes must be carefully researched and weighed before any new legislation is introduced. Do not get me wrong. Operators must always strive to improve the duty of care for the Dutch consumers. The size of the black market is never an excuse to strive for that improvement. But in order to be truly effective as a market and improve, we need policymakers to maintain a broad and fact-based view when drafting new legislation. Though some political wishes seem to reason toward the means and the measures, the focus must remain on the goal: effectively protecting the Dutch consumer. Until all digital doors to the illegal online market are firmly shut, black market dynamics will influence the net effect of any new policy or measure. Closing those digital doors isn't just a matter of new legislation and/or additional enforcement. It is also essential that banks, companies like Google, Facebook, and Instagram start taking their responsibility and completely stop facilitating the black market. These technically advanced and highly developed companies must surely have enough knowledge and resources to effectively block illegal websites that offer gambling to Dutch consumers. The last, but certainly not least perspective, is economic viability. A viable legal market requires economic sustainability. There simply is no Dutch legal online market without licensed operators, without companies that are willing to comply with Dutch legislation, companies that are willing to keep investing in duty of care. In the past 4 years, these companies have faced numerous regulatory changes and an increased regulatory burden, recently accompanied by declining market growth and a sharp rise in gambling tax. As we've seen, compared to global and European trends, the growth of the Dutch market has been diminished. For some, this is considered a win. For them, less online gambling equals more protection. However, if we were to add the words legal online gambling to that sentence, the narrative becomes naive. One could say and ask, is it actually a win? Less legal online gambling doesn't mean less online gambling overall. Just because we don't see it doesn't mean it isn't happening. And the current financial size of the black market is the simple proof of that statement. Licensed Dutch operators are not just competing with each other, but also with the thriving black market. The resilience, however, in our industry is enormous, but it's being stretched to its very limits. Beyond that point, the legal offering becomes less attractive and less diverse, especially compared to illegal alternatives. Fighting that black market demands a sustainable, visible, and attractive legal market. The financial elephant in the room is, of course, the increased gambling tax. While operators face declining revenues, increased regulatory burdens, and a black market competition, the gambling tax has been increased by 12%. The further increase scheduled for January 2026 would result in a staggering rise of 24% in total. And of course, every licensed company in this room acknowledges the risks of entrepreneurship. They know and expect competition. They know and expect market dynamics. But operators should not be strangled out of existence just by tax increases. For their collapse will tip the scales further in favor of the black market, thus undermining consumer protection. Despite recent political developments, I still urge politicians and relevant policymakers to pause the planned increase of the gambling tax in 2026. As promised, first take a broad, fact-based look and fully evaluate all consequences for the Dutch legal online market. Because it would be penny-wise, pound-foolish to aim for higher gambling tax revenues, while in reality there will be less. And instead cause more harm to Dutch consumers and more costs for Dutch society. I refuse to believe that that is the future that we are jointly aiming for. Moving to a conclusion, we can all agree that in that future, one thing will always remain: change. Change is, together with death and taxes, one of life's only certainties. As such, a changing regulatory environment should not be seen as a threat. It's an opportunity, a chance to improve consumer protection, a chance to combat the illegal market, a chance to keep the Dutch online market safe and sustainable for the long term. Grasping that opportunity requires an active, fact-based dialogue amongst all stakeholders. We must continue to invest in the joint dialogue between operators, ministries, care professionals, gambling authority, banks, game provider, and affiliates. Recent expert meetings from the Gambling Authority about responsible gambling policy and a task force against the black market are strong examples of that active dialogue. Of course, our trade organization will remain actively committed to contribute to these initiatives and dialogue. As an industry, we must also strengthen the dialogue between operators to build a shared understanding and baseline execution on core principles like duty of care. But even more so, as mentioned earlier, to speak with one powerful and coherent voice. I believe we can do both effectively without breaking any competition laws. And when in doubt, I am sure Justin Frans and Frank Tolboom are happy to assist. In recent months, VNLOK has intensified its cooperation with trade organization NOGA. It's my professional hope and ambition that this will soon reach a new phase, and even more so, that all operators which aren't a member yet will actively join the dialogue. For we are in the same marathon, so let's share insights. Let's improve. Let's unite our voices. Let's talk the talk. But most importantly, let's walk the walk together. Thank you.